Sometimes you go on a road trip and you bring your sword just in case you need your sword. And we need our sword today because a whole lot of stuff got crammed where Southern people don't want it crammed. Doug Lesmerises, welcome back to KOTN Late Night. 8 teams remain. 5 in the North, 3 in the South, 3 from the Big Ten, 2 from the SEC, 1 each from the Big 12, the Mountain West, and independent Notre Dame. And feelings are hurt all over the South. And I also think in Columbus, where a bunch of Tennessee fans showed up to get bludgeoned in person. So safe travels to all the Vols who made the trip to Columbus. It's great that you love your team, but your team wasn't ready for this. And Bill Landis will join us soon. He's in Columbus. He watched this in person. I'm in a hotel in Western Pennsylvania where I watched Penn State in person today. And I think we are at the point where I can't say it with 100% certainty. I believe it, and I think it very well may be true, that the 4 best teams remaining are 4 Northern teams. And it's Oregon, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Penn State. That's based on what Oregon has done all year and what Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Penn State did this weekend. And if you notice on the broadcasts, when Notre Dame and Penn State dominated, there was constant chatter on the broadcasts, among the talking heads, on social media about the inferiority of the teams that lost. And when Ohio State beat the living everything out of Tennessee tonight, that was not a conversation because most of the national college football media and everybody at ESPN can't see straight when it comes to this stuff. But the honest reality all along was that Penn State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State played awesome this weekend. And it was always more about that. But the TV networks and the honks have to make it about the teams that they think shouldn't be there. But Tennessee tonight showed it didn't belong just as much as SMU or Indiana proved they didn't belong. This was a bludgeoning. But that's not the conversation because people don't want to have that conversation because they have money to make. And so here's the thing. We're going to get to this with Bill. We're going to talk ball. We're going to talk about what I saw at Penn State. We're going to talk about what he saw in person at Ohio State because here at KOTN, we covered all 3 Northern games in person this weekend because we think that's important and we want to be your place for Northern college football. And we have to be because everybody else is a freaking liar. They're liars. They're either lying to themselves and they don't realize they're lying to you, or they're lying to you with an agenda. And this is just sports, right? This is just sports. We're just having a good time. We love this sport. We love talking about it. We love watching it. And then we love building a community to talk about it. So it's just sports. But I will say over the course of this, and I didn't know that this was going to happen, I will say I hate people in the South now. I hate these honks. I hate these honk media people. I actually hate them as people. And I think they're bad for the sport. I think they are legitimately bad for the sport. And I don't know if they're stupid or blind or evilly intentioned. These people who come after, like, it's bad. So we have to stand up because they're honestly terrible, horrible human beings. I'm not sure they're not bad for America, but I'm pretty sure they're bad for college football. So like Paul Feinbaum and Clay Travis and Peter Burns from ESPN, who is the absolute lamest tool on the internet from the SEC network, he is the biggest tool I have ever seen on social media. They're horrible. They're horrible. And they're ruining this because their feelings are hurt. And so we're sorry that your feelings are hurt, and we just have to do an interlude. It's a hurt feelings interlude. Here, let my sword soothe your feelings. But you're bad people, and you're bad for college football because the reality is what this weekend was about was 3 dominant Northern teams, and Texas was nice enough to give us the most competitive game against the 12th seed. So did Clemson were they the team that deserved to be in just because they made it a one-score game in the second half against Texas? Like, I'm confused how this is supposed to work. When the northern teams dominate, Indiana and SMU don't belong. Nobody ever says that about Tennessee, but then Clemson hung with Texas. So that's because Clemson's so good. It's a travesty. The discussion is a travesty. The ball is great. We have 8 really good teams left. Okay. We really do. We're going to have 4 awesome quarterfinals. We really are. This is the reality of this. And part of the thing that we have to do, and now you're getting some 4-team truthers because their feelings are hurt. Because, like, what do you want instead? What did you want instead of this weekend? Because here's what happened for the 4-team truthers who are trying to go back in time, because the South lives in the past in a million different ways. The South lives in the past. It's what they're accustomed to doing. It's what their whole ethos is built on. They want to live in the past. So every argument you have with Southern college football fans is about what they did in the past because they don't want to live in the present right now. And everything right now, there are people who want to go back to a 14 playoff, but we can't have a 14 playoff because either Penn State or Notre Dame won't be in that 14 playoff. And we have to expand this playoff enough to make sure we get the teams that belong. And if that now means we get a couple extra teams who have a great experience, whose fan bases get excited all year, whose fan bases are proud of making it, and then maybe don't play a great game in the first round. Okay, I get it. Maybe that's what will happen, but we have to get these best teams in. Ohio State, did they look like they belong? Did Notre Dame look like they belong? Did Penn State look like they belong? Who are you taking out? You taking out Georgia? You want to take out Georgia? You want to take out Texas? They didn't win anything all year. You can take Texas out if you want. You want to do that? You're not going to take out Oregon. We needed to get these teams in because they earned it. So if you are a person who is complaining, whose major thing about this first weekend of the 12-team playoff is that you're complaining, you're a freaking loser, okay? And it's because you have a problem. The sport's not the problem. You're the problem. And we see you. Because here we're going to celebrate it. So we're going to have Bill come in and join us from Ohio State because he saw that firsthand. And I want to talk about Penn State. And by the way, we picked the Clemson upset. Bill and I both picked Clemson, and that was wrong. So congratulations to Texas. But Clemson gave them a much better. That was the most competitive low seed was against Texas. Is it because of Dabo? Is it because of Cade Klubnik? Maybe legitimately, yes. That Dabo's a 2-time national champion and Cade Klubnik's a number 1 quarterback recruit in the country. And were they maybe a little more ready for this than Rhett Lashley and Kevin Jennings at SMU and Curtis Rourke and Kurt Signetti at Indiana and Josh Heupel and Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee? Maybe that could be it. Or maybe Texas didn't play as well. Maybe Texas let them back in the game in a way that Ohio State and Notre Dame and Penn State did not. So what is it about? Because it's just the disingenuousness of the conversation led by ESPN. Chris Fowler and Herbie, they didn't say a word. They didn't say a frickin' word about Tennessee not belonging there. How much did we hear it about with Indiana? What was more competitive? Tennessee, that team beat Alabama. That team beat Alabama. They weren't ready for this on either side of the ball. So I'm not shocked by it. They were mid. They were puffed up. They scored 53 points against the 6 bad defenses they played. They scored 22 points a game against anybody with the pulse. This was not a surprise. I'm pointing because the TV's over there in my hotel room. I'm not surprised by what Tennessee did not do, but Ohio State made them do this. Bill Landis is ready to join us. We'll start with Ohio State. I have a lot of thoughts about Penn State, though, too. I thought this was potentially a transformational moment for the Penn State football program. And it's a thing I love about this 12-team playoff because I think Penn State and that program, we have to be able in this sport, I think, to have tiers of success. I don't think we can live in a world anymore where it is if you are not the national champion, you're not successful. And the other thing, too, what we have to remember about all this is the bowl system blew itself up. So there was a time when if you didn't make the national championship game, but you went and won a New Year's Six Bowl or you went and won, beat an SEC team in the Citrus Bowl or something, you could have celebrate that at the end of the year. the bowl system with all the opt-outs blew itself up. So there wasn't a real postseason beyond the playoff. So the only answer is expand the playoff. And I firsthand witnessed what that meant for a program like Penn State. And I think it could change what Penn State is. I think it could change how Penn State thinks. That was a great day in Happy Valley with their fans connected to that program, just like it was a great night in Columbus. But Ohio State's had those moments, and Penn State hasn't had as many of those moments in recent times. So why are we in such a hurry? Why is the main talking point, even on the broadcast half the time, about that SMU didn't compete? Why is it not about Penn State's dominance? Why is it not about how good Nick Singleton and Abdul Carter and Jalen Kimber and A.J. Harris and Katron Allen and all those guys are? It's because it's a disingenuous conversation because most of the people talking have an agenda and they lie to you. So listen, we're here to celebrate the North. We're here to have a Northern community. That's our agenda. We're not going to lie. And if listen, I'll tell you what, if we get into the quarterfinals and the North gets shown up, we're not going to lie about it. We're not going to lie to you. And we're not going to go on social media and whine and cry like these Southern SEC babies. Bill, I don't want to put you on the spot right away, but I said coming in that initially it's just sports. We just started this and it's North versus South and whatever. But actually over this season and the way that Southern people behave on social media and the way Southern media behave, I actually hate them as human beings now. Do you hate them also?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting there, I think.
Yeah.
I don't maybe it's always been that way. I mean, and we're just paying attention to it more now, but I'm starting to feel that way. I don't know if I hate them as human beings. I'm more like embarrassed for them, like secondhand embarrassed.
Yeah.
Because some of them are even like people in our profession, and it's like, can you not like make us all look bad by just acting like a clown because you're upset that your teams aren't doing well? Like so. But I guess it gets to a point where you start to harbor hatred for the person too. I try not to do that. You know what I mean? Like life's too short. Life's too short to harbor real hatred for people. So I think I'll stick with embarrassment for now. But people are certainly crying and not doing themselves any favors with their credibility, I think, this weekend.
Okay, you want to talk some ball?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Ohio State's fresh. We'll talk about Ohio State first, and then I do want to certainly give Penn State a big throaty conversation as well. I'll be honest, when this game started, and so Ohio State started right. They threw a little bubble to Emeka Egbuka. They were getting the ball on the perimeter to Travion Henderson, but they also had a disorganized, forced timeout called on like the third play. I think the second play.
No, that was they subbed late, and then Tennessee got to sub, and Tennessee did the thing where you like walk off the field while you're subbing, and then by the time they were ready to stop the ball, there was like 3 seconds on the play clock.
So it's not their fault. I didn't think it was a great look to call a timeout on your third offensive play.
They could have operated faster, but it was just like Tennessee using the clock to its advantage and the substitution rules to its advantage.
Okay. But they did, like Will Howard threw behind Emeka Egbuka over the middle on a play that would have been there. Yeah. And then Tegra Shabola got absolutely blown up on a third down sack. But the face mask that changed the course of Ohio State history gave Ohio State new life on that drive. And then they were off to the races for the rest of the game. 5 plays in, I was like, I can't believe it. I can't believe they had all this time, and this is what it is. And then it was like they just needed to catch their breath. And then it was, oh, this is what it is. What did you think of the offensive game plan for Ohio State tonight?
My mind actually didn't go there on the first drive when there were some issues, no doubt about it. I'm not trying to gloss over them, although I guess in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really matter. When they opened with a bubble screen to Emeka Egbuka that was well blocked and picked up like 6 or 7 yards, I was like, okay, they know what they're supposed to do in this game. And then it was pretty clear, I think, from that point forward, once they got past those couple early hiccups, that Ohio State had the right idea about this game. And it actually ended up running the ball fine, well enough. But it had to be throw first. It had to be target Jeremiah Smith and target Emeka Egbuka. They got Carnell Tate involved a little later on. Will Howard had to scramble a little bit, but it was everything we knew it was going to have to be. And not even really in this game. Like if Ohio State was going to go win a national championship, this is what the offense needs to look like. And they didn't hesitate to get to it right away. We can talk more about it too. They tweaked their run game. There was a lot there. But I just thought that the tone that was set by first snap of the game, here's a bubble to Emeka, is exactly where Ohio State needed to be in this game.
Yeah, and then a pass to Travion in space on like a nice scheme to get him open, and then a shot to Jeremiah Smith. And that, I mean, I think they only wound up targeting Jeremiah Smith 6 times. He had 6 catches for 103 yards, but I think it might have all been in the first half. Like, it was very clearly a plan from the get-go. And in such stark contrast to Michigan, they decided they were going to let their best players go win this game for them. And they came out and set the tempo, and they did that. And I think a lot of people we had talked about, would this be like the Georgia game for Ohio State 2 years ago, where they lose to Michigan and they come out and they let it rip against Georgia and fall point short? And I think the answer was yes, right? It was very similar to that, was it not?
Unquestionably, yes. Yeah, it was very similar to that, and it wasn't like, because we talked a lot about coming into the game about like Jermon McCoy, the really good cornerback for Tennessee, and like maybe that's a guy that can give them some problems. And it's like Jeremiah Smith cooked that dude all game. Like it wasn't like their game plan wasn't like, let's avoid Jermon McCoy and attack other areas. They just attacked. It didn't matter who was the player they were targeting or who was the guy in coverage. It was fairly aggressive. They played faster too. There wasn't very much huddling. They weren't playing at like super speed, but they were definitely playing faster than they have played for much of this season. And I was clearly unsure about whether or not we'd get that kind of mentality from Ohio State, which is why I picked Tennessee to win the game, and one of the all-time bad picks by me. But we got it. Honestly, I think we got the best of Ohio State in this game. This is by far, without question, I think the best Ohio State has looked on both sides of the ball in one game. And I give them credit, because I really had little confidence they were going to be able to find that in a fairly short order after the Michigan game, and they found it.
I said before you came on that I think it's very possible the 4 best teams left are Penn State, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Ohio State. I don't know what Georgia's going to look like with a backup quarterback. You know, Texas certainly did some things on both sides of the ball, but they also let Clemson hang around more than any other underdog hung around. Do you think that's where we could be? And you and I will only discuss this 4,000 times over the next 10 days. But I don't. Of course, I'm going to say that on this show. But I also I think it. I think it. It doesn't mean that it's true to the world, but I think it. I think they're the 4 best teams.
I think I guess I would say it's probably true. The only reason I hesitate is because I did not really get to see much of Texas against Clemson with my drive over here to the shoe, and then I was down on the field for pregame for much of that game. So I didn't really watch any of it to have a take on how Texas looked or how Texas did or did not perform in that game. So, but even with that being said, like you could have almost convinced me of that coming into the playoff without knowing how anybody played, that those maybe were the 4 best teams. So I can be there with you. I guess I'll reserve the right to change my mind a little bit if I watch Texas and come away with a different opinion of them.
7.4 yards per play for the Ohio State offense today. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, 20 carries for 114 yards combined. Most of that Travion, who ran for 80 yards. Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, 11 catches for 184 combined. And then the game from Will Howard, 24 of 29 for 311, 2 touchdowns. This was a lot to bounce back from the Michigan game for Will Howard. And there is something I want to talk about regarding that. But how did you think Will Howard played tonight? And were you at all surprised that he played like this?
I thought he played awesome, and yeah, I was surprised. I didn't know how to read Will Howard during the week. He was different, I guess is the way I would just say it, when he spoke to the media on, I believe it was Tuesday. And this was really the first time that he was sort of getting questioned about, like, what's up? Why didn't you play well? Like, how did you? It was our first time talking to him. We talked to him after the Michigan game, but like with some time to actually analyze things. And he was just carrying himself in a way that I couldn't tell if it was like annoyance, or he was like fired up and ready to get on the field, or if he was like anyway still feeling the remnants of what happened on that day. So I was really uncertain of what we would see from him tonight, and then we got probably his best game. Like I still think he played really well against Oregon, but he really only had like one bad throw in this game, and that was the one you mentioned earlier where he threw behind Emeka Egbuka, and Emeka almost caught it with one hand kind of behind his back. Otherwise, I mean, he was incredibly accurate. I thought he played with a tremendous amount of poise on a day where he was actually cleaner in the pocket than I thought he would be. But even when he was under duress, I thought he handled that well. I don't believe Tennessee sacked him. He had a couple of scrambles that were nice. So I thought that this was a return to the form that Will Howard's had for most of the season. I think he's been pretty steady for Ohio State. You know, you get that blunder here or there, but even the interception tonight, I thought was one born out of aggression on a top shelf throw to Jeremiah Smith that probably should have been pass interference. And the guy made a heck of a play on the back line of the end zone. Like, I don't really fault Will Howard for that at all. So this was, I don't know how you could nitpick it, like, other than that one throw to Emeka that at this point is inconsequential. This was everything I think you'd wanted to see from Will Howard if you were wondering, can this guy bounce back in a way that can lead Ohio State to a national championship?
Quick early lines. Penn State favored by 10.5 over Boise. Texas favored by 13.5 over Arizona State. I'm looking at DraftKings. Ohio State favored by 1 over Oregon. And Georgia favored by 1.5 over Notre Dame. I think those early lines, Notre Dame had been the favorite like before this. I don't know what changed on that. People are asking about this. Somebody asked about it. Sloopy. Thoughts on Herb Strait hating on OSU fans on the broadcast. So I just want to address this very quickly. We know this is not only an Ohio State audience. The Buckeyes aren't victims here. I think the loss to Michigan was as bad as any Ohio State loss in the last 20 years. And they did that. And that coaching staff did that. And I think Kirk Herbstreit is wounded, particularly when it comes to Ohio State fans. And he turns everything on fans. And he was talking about how the lunatic fringe has expanded. And I think he makes it too personal. And if you think the lunatic fringe has expanded, maybe it's that your definition of lunatics is no longer correct. Maybe what these people are just sort of justifiably, reasonably upset Ohio State fans that Ohio State on the most important weekend of the year for the 4th straight year came out and played a horrible game in the most important game of the year. So there is this very quick thing, and I don't like it when broadcasters do it. They act like fans turned against this team for no reason. That team played an awful game against an overmatched opponent with much more talent. They earned the doubt. They earned the sports hate. And so let's not forget in the end why any of this exists. It's because of the fans. So if you are a fan who is personally attacking a player on social media or sending death threats or whatever, then you are the lunatic fringe. If you're just mad that the team lost and you think maybe the coach should be fired if he doesn't do a better job, you're not a lunatic. So Herbie can chill with that stuff, because I'm a little sick of everybody coming after the fans all the time. And I'm sorry that Ohio State has high standards, but guess what? There are a whole bunch of fired up Ohio State fans in that stadium. And when they're good, they are rewarded and they are greeted as champions and heroes, just like with every other Northern team we have. And when you play below the expectations for people that are paying your salary, and that now extends to players, then it's okay for them to be upset. And the victimization, the constant victimization of these people, woe is me, oh, these poor guys. It was a terrible performance, and this was just as good. And guess what we're doing right now? Talking about how awesome it is. So just chill, Herbie. Just chill on this stuff, because this is your audience too. Who do you think's paying your freaking salary to fly all over the country and cover 4 different games? Because apparently America can't watch a football game without Kirk Herbstreit talking over it. God forbid. It's really annoying to me, Landis. And again, and here's the other thing that has to happen. And again, this is a very specific Ohio State conversation. Ohio State's got to chill with the Woody against the world stuff. They've got to get the fans back on their side. And it is time for Ohio State to stop acting like their own fans are against them. Their own fans are holding them to a standard. And when they reach that standard, they are celebrated. That was a horrible performance a couple weeks ago. This was a tremendous performance. It is an opportunity to bring everybody back together. But they're not victims, Bill. But if they're thinking that way, that's bad for them. So I just wanted to say that that's mostly about Herbstreit and the way the media sometimes portrays this. This performance by Ohio State was outstanding. And Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and every player on that team and Jim Knowles deserve a tremendous amount of credit for it, Bill. And guess what? Every Ohio State fan in the nation is going to give them that credit anyway.
No, yeah, I think they will. And I was talking about this. Where were we? I think I was doing an Ohio State show earlier this week, and we were talking about how many like Tennessee fans might be here, and we weren't sure, and we can talk about what it was actually. But I actually thought if there was any, and I think there was some like lingering, like how much is the crowd going to be behind this team kind of stuff, or what is the crowd sort of going to make Ohio State show before it does get behind them? And I think when the predominantly Ohio State audience showed up to the shoe and saw how many Tennessee fans were there, they were kind of like instantly behind the Buckeyes, even with everything that happened a couple of weeks ago. And as I agree with you 100%. People were justifiably upset with that and should be. It didn't take much, I think. I thought like from the second that even the team walked into the stadium, the vibes were kind of back for people getting behind this team and wanting to push it on a championship run. So I don't know what Herbie was getting on about. I wasn't listening to the broadcast. I caught a very short snippet of that like toward the end of the game, and he sounded kind of sad. I thought his tone was weird, but anyway, I won't criticize it too much because I didn't really hear anything he said. I'll just say that like I was very curious what the vibes are going to be in here when it came to the fans getting behind Ohio State, and I thought it was apparent very early that they were behind them in this game.
What did you think the breakdown of the crowd was?
It was easy to tell about the middle of the third quarter when the Tennessee fans started leaving, how many of them were here. So I would say, I don't know, maybe like 20,000 of about 100,000 person crowd were Tennessee fans, maybe between 20 and 30. It was a good showing. By far the most I've seen from an opposing fan base in the shoe. The thing that was throwing people off is that like they were all here immediately. Like during pregame warmups, it was practically all orange. The Ohio State crowd was a late arriving one for sure, but they were all in here by the time kickoff happened. But like the Twitter uproar and the Vol takeover stuff was really picking up steam. I saw on social media because until probably about a half hour before the game kicked off, there was a lot of Tennessee fans in here. But the Ohio State fans more than balanced it out, and it definitely felt like an Ohio State home game. Tennessee fans were loud until they got down 14-0, and then you kind of didn't hear them, and you didn't really hear Rocky Top all that much. And the loudest you heard it was when Ohio State chose to play it at the end of the game as a way to troll them. Yeah, so it was good. It was actually quite impressive, like the turnout that Tennessee had, but it wasn't anything like what was being portrayed on social media or on television.
Okay. You talked about the run game. What did you see? Did you see? Were there some schematic things that you thought Ohio State pulled out in a different way?
Counter. And very. Well, I guess I want to go back and break it down snap by snap, but it just felt like very little kind of interior-based run game. We talked about it after the Michigan game, right? Like with the retooled offensive line, maybe it makes more sense for Ohio State to get back to more gap scheme stuff, and they definitely did that. And I think we're pretty creative with the way they did it too. They dressed it up quite a bit. I thought they did a nice job protecting their run schemes better with RPOs, just like easy kind of passes into the flat to Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Ibuka, a couple times to a tight end. So I tried to ask Chip Kelly during the week, like, hey, how easy might it be for you to kind of retool your run game on the fly? And he's like, well, we don't have a choice. We kind of have to do it. And they did. And I thought that it was pretty clear that those kind of runs where you get the pullers and you're not so much worried about double teams and trying to chase down guys, that suited this offensive line much better than the stuff Ohio State was trying to do against Michigan.
Yeah, I'm going to pull my sword out again. I feel like we're getting a little bit too serious here. The South can cram it, right? Like, what a great weekend. So here's the thing, too, that I think we're realizing. So everybody wants the buys. Obviously, you want to buy, but like this home field advantage, I mean, I absolutely felt it at Penn State today. Did you feel it at Notre Dame last night?
Yeah, I definitely felt it at Notre Dame. Yeah,
and you felt like you felt it today.
Yes, absolutely.
Like it is really a thing. And so there's been a lot of debate about like, do you want to be the 1, you want to be the 5? But I think the main thing is there's such a clear delineation. Right, you get the top 4 get a bye, but the difference between getting a home game and not getting a home game, and then getting a home game in the North, I think is worth an extra 40%. Because I don't know this for sure, but the way they were talking about on the game, Dylan Sampson for Tennessee basically didn't play. Right, the SEC Offensive Player of the Year had 2 carries for 6 yards. He basically didn't play, and they were talking on the broadcast about his hamstrings and stuff. it felt like to me, this is not my knowledge, it felt like the cold was a contributing factor to soft tissue stuff with him. And that is a huge advantage. And then again, it's like, oh, we joked about the heated bench and all this stuff. But if your guys aren't used to this and then you come up and playing it and now your hamstrings can't handle it, it's unfortunate for that guy. We don't want anybody to be hurt, but I think it's a real thing. So in addition to like maybe not playing your best, I thought there was an actual physical toll. And I don't know what happened with Squirrel White and everybody else on the Tennessee roster, but it felt like the cold affected them that way, which again just doubles down on how big a deal it is that this game was in Columbus and not Knoxville, even though all week they tried to pretend that Knoxville is in Manitoba.
I think it makes it more difficult to play through stuff, no doubt. I think maybe that's what was up with the receivers for Tennessee, because they were like, I think you mentioned they were in non-contact jerseys all week in practice, right? And then really, I guess it was their top three, Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Squirrel White, and Squirrel White and Dante Thornton both left this game. And I don't think either one of them returned. They left in the second quarter, I think, before halftime. I don't know that we saw either one the rest of the day. And Dylan Sampson as well. There were a couple other things that popped up for Tennessee throughout the game too. So I think it is a thing where you like really got to bear down and try to play through it. And it was cold here. Like it was colder. It was colder here, I thought, than it was last night at Notre Dame. And I thought Notre Dame was pretty darn cold too. So I think it was a contributing factor, or maybe like when it is sort of that miserably cold and you get down as early as Tennessee did, like and as quickly as Tennessee did. It was a 5-play touchdown drive, 3 and out, 5-play touchdown drive, 3 and out. It really almost felt like the game was over. I know Tennessee did a nice job of tightening it before the half, and then Ohio State put it away. But I wonder, like when you're just like so taken out of your game or out of you're just like your psyche a little bit by how cold it is, if something as simple as giving up 2 scores early just becomes that much more difficult to overcome. Because it kind of gets compounded by the weather. I did kind of feel that way.
So, light box from Knowles most of the game, right? That it was let the front and maybe one linebacker handle most of the business and then play coverage, and it felt like it worked to perfection. What was your read on how Jim Knowles decided to scheme this up?
Yeah, that's what it felt like, and they handled it really well. Ohio State's front did. That was the other thing I was just a little unsure of, is what version of Ohio State's defensive line are we going to get? And we got a really good version of it. Jack Sawyer played great. Tyleik Williams played great. JT Tuimoloau played great. They rotated a little bit up front too, which you needed to do when Tennessee has the volume of plays that it has. So it did seem like they were comfortable playing with the lighter box and letting those guys control things. I thought like I was simultaneously very impressed with how Ohio State played up front and woefully underimpressed by Tennessee's offensive line. Like those dudes they didn't show up ready to play. They got whooped all game. So that's a credit to Ohio State for doing that. I think maybe Tennessee got back into it by running Nico Iamaleava a little bit toward the end of the first half, and I think there was some adjustments there to kind of take that away. And when Ohio State's defensive backs like kind of had to step up and just play one-on-one, they did. It was the coverage and the rush working together, no doubt about that. But if you're able to play a team like Tennessee with this style of offense and handle the run game without having to take away from the back end of your defense, that's when I think Tennessee's life becomes really difficult, and Ohio State made it so for them tonight.
Yeah, and Nico just was not ready for this as a thrower once they did that, and that's fine. He really kept them. Anything that they got offensively once Sampson was out, as you said, was based on him running, and so he fought. But he's just a young guy, and I just don't think he was a guy to be scared of. 14 of 31 for 104. They were a puffed up fraud of an offense that thrived on inferior competition. And I thought the Ohio State corners showed up today. The defensive line showed up and won one-on-one battles. And I just thought Ohio State did a good job. I don't know if they had a spy on Nico, but they sort of had just maybe one backer lurking or a safety lurking, that those guys made tackles in the middle of the field. I just thought it was. And then I think the Tennessee right tackle got benched, right? Or did he get hurt? John Campbell. I'm not sure. He was out of the game. And my light ran out of battery. Hold on. Put on this light. Now I look like a ghost. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to bring out my sword, boys and girls. Their tackles were bad. Like I thought their tackles were bad coming in, and they were. There was a lot. And here's the thing. And again, like we want to talk about Northern football, but I know people like it when we get riled up about the SEC. This team beat Alabama.
Right.
What did this team have to beat mighty Alabama? Like we're obsessed with the fact, like everyone's obsessed with the Vanderbilt and Oklahoma losses. Tennessee is also not that good. Like that's the only reason Tennessee made the playoff, because they beat Bama. And it's like what is it about Tennessee's that's good? And listen, I get it. Dylan Sampson was hurt. So that was part of it, right? If he had played, I guess it would have made a difference. But they had a bad offensive line, and Ohio State's skill and game plan offensively completely negated. James Pierce Jr. tracks some people down from behind and that kind of thing. He's going to, run out on a screen and make a tackle. He's a good player. But in the end, it wasn't that, and this is what I thought would happen and did. It wasn't that Ohio State had to win battles up front. They had to avoid battles up front, which is the whole thing with Ohio State, is stop playing on other people's terms, play on your terms. They played on their terms. And by the way, Luke Montgomery made his first significant contribution at left guard and pancaked the dude. So like the Ohio State offensive line also showed up a little bit, but we didn't see Tegra Shabola getting beat play after play because they were too busy getting the ball out of Will Howard's hands and into the hands of playmakers. So that Bama couldn't do that against this mid team. Cram that up your cram hole, you Bama whiners. My God, what is wrong with you? Now you lost to 3 mid teams this year. You bunch of babies. What a bunch of freaking losers. Everybody in the state of Alabama is a baby loser.
That was running through my head basically the entire game. And I understand that Tennessee is not the best of what the SEC has to offer. Georgia and Texas were the ones who played in the the SEC title game. But Tennessee was undoubtedly the next deserving team from that conference to get into this playoff. And it's like, for all the whining we heard starting on Friday night throughout the entire day on Saturday up until this game kicked off, and it was like, this is the team you sent us, Tennessee. This is the team we're supposed to be impressed by when we're thinking about your league's prowess and how you guys got screwed over and should have been more involved in this thing. It's like, no, we don't need to see that. Maybe Georgia and Texas will play well in this thing. They certainly have an opportunity to do so. But any crying about SEC getting more teams in, whether that's from ESPN employees or Lane Kiffin himself, who went awful quiet on Saturday night too, like just shut up. Like your entire league was propped up on this like myth that you are superior football programs and over the course of time, maybe you will be, but you weren't this season, and you sent a team up to Columbus and it got its butt whooped. Yeah.
So they're mid. What else do you want to talk about with Ohio State? Because I do want to get to Penn State. Is there anything else that we're missing here in terms of the accolades that Ohio State deserves for this? They did wind up kind of rotating the 3 guards through the 2 spots, and again, seemed to work.
It did. Yeah, it did work. They did rotate a little bit, and then Austin Sareveld, who started at left guard but also played right guard, I think got a little dinged up toward the end of the game. So he came out. So I guess that's something to monitor moving forward for Ohio State. But I was very afraid of what that might look like, and it actually worked out okay. And I guess my biggest thing, like aside from Ohio State finding a way to play its best game and having a really good offensive plan, is that I think you should reasonably come out of this thinking that the offensive line situation is perhaps not as dire as was made out to be. And like certainly I made it out to be like a thing that I felt like was insurmountable for this team in this playoff. And now coming off of this game, I don't feel that way. I don't think anyone should feel that way. And then the defensive line played its best game of the year too. So if you have that going on in the trenches for Ohio State, with all the skill and talent they have and Will Howard playing the way he was, like this is why people thought Ohio State was the favorite to win the whole thing 4 weeks ago. So I think we saw that tonight.
We're going to get an Ohio State-Oregon quarterfinal in the Rose Bowl. You will cover that. It's going to be a coin toss game. I think we're both very impressed with Penn State and Notre Dame. Texas won. Georgia certainly has good wins this year. I think there are going to be a lot of people who think the 2 best teams left are going to play each other in the Rose Bowl in the quarters. So That's just the situation. And I'm not going to call it a de facto national championship game, because I absolutely think somebody from the opposite side, Penn State or Notre Dame, or if Georgia gets it together and gets better quarterback play from somebody, maybe even them, can absolutely play with the Ohio State-Oregon winner. But a great team is going to win that game. I have no doubt about that. That's not going to be you're not going to slink off with the win in that game. That's a banger between two powerhouses who now both see. And again, this is to Oregon's credit. They dealt with injuries in the last month of the year and really showed themselves, I think, with Tez Johnson back and with Jordan Birch back, but also Penn State ran on them in the Big Ten title game a little bit in the second half, which will be a thing for this Ohio State run game. It's going to be a great matchup, Bill, but a great team will win.
Yeah, I think they're the two best teams in the country. And I won't call it a de facto national title game either, but I think it'll be even potentially like a game that feels almost bigger than the national championship. I'll be curious when it's all over, when we reflect on like the feeling going into this Rose Bowl with this matchup and the feeling going into any other game the rest of the way, and how they might compare, because this is going to be a monster on January 1st in Pasadena. Like, this is, I think everyone who follows college football has been looking forward to Ohio State and Oregon getting back on the field together. Now we're going to get
You will be there. I will be at Georgia Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl in the next round, where I brought my sword on the road to State College into my Pittsburgh hotel room. I did not bring my Georgia hat. You have to make choices in life. I chose the sword over the dog mentality hat, and I'll own that decision. Let's talk about Penn State and the game that I was at today. I thought it was a great day for Penn State football. So in comparison to the Tennessee crowd, I thought that the SMU crowd in Happy Valley was 1% of the crowd. They announced it at 106,000. It might have been less than 1%, because I'm not sure there were 1,600 SMU fans there. So it wasn't every single seat filled, but when that thing got going, the home crowd made a difference. It threw off SMU quarterback Kevin Jennings. It rattled him along with the Penn State defense rattling him. This was James Franklin's 100th win as the coach of Penn State. They announced that at the end of the game, and the crowd gave him an ovation, 2 pick sixes, and the crowd went crazy there for the pick sixes when that happened. Abdul Carter was a real problem getting pressure. I had some concerns about the Penn State linebackers tackling, and then they didn't really need to tackle because all they were doing was picking balls off and running the other way. But I just felt great about the idea that Penn State got to have this moment. And I think to do this in a playoff game, it's a playoff win. It's a fantastic win. I don't know if you talk about the 2016 win over Ohio State in State College, which is James Franklin's one win over Ohio State. That's certainly up there. But part of this, Bill, is I just think programs need to have the opportunity to have great days. And that great day can't only be winning a championship. So this is a Penn State team that just went and lost in the Big Ten title game, but they earned this opportunity to come back and have this day here. They earned it. They weren't given this. They earned it. But that was the third best team in the Big Ten, because I know they made the Big Ten title game, but they lost head-to-head to Ohio State and Oregon. It was the third best team in the Big Ten, dominating, absolutely dominating. Drew Aller wasn't perfect. Drew Aller, after the game, talked about some throws he missed. He had some stuff on the sideline. He probably needs to be a little bit better, but I didn't think they missed Bo Prabula. I thought Nick Singleton and Katron Allen ran really hard. They had a good game. The offensive line played well, and the defense really got after it. And it was these guys are walking off the field, ringing that victory bell right in front of the tunnel before they go into the locker room. And to see 100,000 people that happy in that moment, that didn't exist. And I don't think Penn State should have to win the national title, or even have to beat Ohio State, or have to win a Big Ten title to be able to celebrate a version of success. And I think that version of success never existed for Penn State until this playoff created it. So we said at the start, the 12-team playoff was created for Penn State, and then today they showed exactly what that meant. And now they have an opportunity to go beat Boise and be one of the Final Four teams. but like, this is a banner that you hang. This is a moment that you remember. This is a thing that 100,000 people and fathers and sons and wives and husbands and cousins and grandmas and kids will remember being at that playoff game. And so when people immediately turn it to SMU didn't deserve to be there, you're losing sight of what's gained here. So we've created something with these home games, and I thought, I was trying to think to myself how Penn State can take this feeling and this success and what it might mean for them down the road, because in a lot of ways they're still the same team they've been under James Franklin, which is like a good 10-win team that can't quite get over the top. They lost to the two best teams they played this year. They played them pretty good, but they lost to them. And in past years, that was the final definition. This provides a new definition, and they embraced it and they dominated. And I say, God bless the playoff for that.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I think, I guess I just don't want that to be said and be misconstrued as like, well, whatever happens now is great. Like, I think a program like Penn State should look at this field, should look at the quality of its team, and look at the way that it's playing. I think to itself, like, we can go win a national championship, right? So
100%.
I think both things can be true, and it will be really interesting. I don't know. It probably doesn't apply to Ohio State, and it probably doesn't apply to teams like Georgia or perhaps even like an Alabama. It might apply to like everybody else in the sport. that a moment like the one that Penn State was able to have today, or the one that Notre Dame was able to have last night, with the benefit of time, will be looked back upon quite fondly, and perhaps like redefine a little bit what it is, like what it means to have a successful season in a way that I do think can be good for the sport, right? I'm not trying to tell you, Notre Dame fans or Penn State fans, that you shouldn't ever, not strive for your team or hope for your team to win a national title. But this is just like a cool new thing that a lot of fan bases would have never even considered a possibility before, right? Why would you, with the way that the postseason for the sport was constructed? So to just see like the joy and the energy in South Bend, and even here tonight, like even in Ohio Stadium, which is a program that has maybe the highest standards, some of the highest standards in the country. Like I still felt that, and I felt like I could feel it sort of through the television in Happy Valley. It sounded pretty turned up there.
It was.
I don't know if TNT was bumping up the crowd noise or what, but I thought of what I saw on television this weekend, that sounded like the loudest environment of the four, maybe most consistently. And I'm glad it was, because I think you want teams maybe who weren't even in this, or fan bases who weren't in this, to like look at that and think like, man, that's cool. I want our team to get that kind of opportunity to host a playoff game.
Yeah. And I do think it's hard that, again, I think in this era, Penn State and Notre Dame had mostly at the highest level been defined by what they didn't do. Notre Dame made the 14 playoff twice and then got there and didn't really compete. And that's what stuck with you, right? And that Penn State. And now I think we need to make room for a successful second tier. It doesn't mean you strive for the top tier, but I think Notre Dame and Penn State are perfect examples of, hey, we can make the playoff. We could win a playoff game or two. We're striving for a national championship, but we no longer are going to have to look at, we lost in a semifinal as a negative thing, because you get in and you lose. Now, if you lose in a semifinal, you've won 2 games to get to that semifinal. Right. So or as opposed to, we won a bowl game with a bunch of people opting out. So I just think that is, listen, like, not everybody can win a national title. And so bowl games had existed. And I think I talked about this before you came on, Bill. The bowl system exploded. And the old bowl system, when it really was thriving, did exist for a way for a lot of teams to end the season with success. And that kind of died. And so, like, not for everybody, but I think for that second tier, it died in a lot of ways. Well, you won, but everybody opted out, right? And that this has reinvigorated that. So I thought it was a great weekend for Penn State and Notre Dame, who are so important to what we do here on KOTN, so important to the North, because, again, as we said, we know who Michigan is. They're the defending national champs, and they're going to be back. We know who Ohio State is and has been, and we know who Oregon is and is going to be. But when you throw Penn State and Notre Dame into that mix, now you're talking about 5 up here, 5 in the North that can hang with anybody. That's the new world, brother. Let me get my sword again, but that's the new world.
Yeah. You got to get your sword. celebrate that. We also we're guaranteed now to have Northern teams in both semifinals, right? If you include Boise State as part of the equation.
Yeah, because we'll get Boise State or Penn State.
Yeah, and we'll get Ohio State or Oregon.
Yeah, so pretty good.
This is a good Friday and Saturday for the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah. So Penn State held SMU to 3.5 yards per play. Ohio State's defense played very well tonight. And I don't want to get into a 90-minute discussion about this, but as I say, potentially, well, this is going to be not true. Potentially, if the four Northern teams are the four best teams in the country, could we say that Oregon and Ohio State have the two best offenses remaining?
Yes.
And then I was going to say, do Penn State and Notre Dame have the two best defenses? But that's when you would throw Texas and Georgia into that mix, and maybe Ohio State when they play their best.
I might throw Ohio State in that mix before I throw the other two in there.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little. They're all like very good defenses is the problem. I think it's just very clear cut to me that the two best offenses are Ohio State and Oregon's.
Yeah.
Like Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Texas's defenses are all quite good. It's hard to separate that particular group, but I think you could make that argument and reasonably stand on it if you wanted to.
And so I do think, as we think about tiers here and what I don't want to say got exposed, but I think there were clear delineations, and that's the real thing. That just because Indiana is not as good as Notre Dame doesn't mean Indiana is terrible, because I don't think there's a ton of teams on that second tier. And I think what we saw is Tennessee, you have to lump. I mean, Tennessee's in the same group as SMU and Indiana. Is anybody going to argue differently that somehow Tennessee is a higher level than Indiana and SMU just because they beat a mid-Alabama team in a game when neither Nico nor Jalen Milroe could hit the broadside of a frickin' barn? Right? Like that's Tennessee's what's the difference? But the bottom line is they're not as good as the teams they played, clearly. But we also have to understand that third tier is going to get in the playoff. And so where now people are getting mad, JD Pickleman and other people are getting mad, DJ Pickleman, I like pickles, I like pickleball, I like the SEC, let's have a 14 playoff, bro. DJ Pickleman. The media is filled with idiots. Do you think they're stupid? Now we're just playing honk, troll, or moron. Yeah. God, they're dumb.
No, it's more. I think it's more honk.
Okay, it's more honk.
Yeah.
But like, if you want to revert, like why are people mad that these teams got an opportunity? And again, that I think we're gonna have three tiers in the sport now, right? As opposed to kind of having only one tier before, or two tiers, which was maybe you can win the national championship or go win a bowl. That's the second tier. Now we have the teams that really can win a national championship, and that's how they're defined and what their goal is. We're going to have teams who really expect to make the playoff and then do something. And that, I think, is Penn State and Notre Dame, right? That like they're not national championship or bust, but they're also not just happy to get in. And then we're going to have the teams that getting in is a true accomplishment. And I think Tennessee, for this year, now they want to do more with Nico eventually, but for this year, I think this is an accomplishment for Tennessee. It clearly is for SMU and Indiana, but why does that make people mad? That, again, we have three tiers of success, three different ways, three different opportunities for fan bases to be made happy by the playoff, and then Paul Feinbaum got the four remaining hairs on his head in a bunch about it. Like, why? Why are you so mad? I didn't bring my bald cap either.
Yeah, it's just the I don't know if it's the illusion or delusion that somehow like an Alabama or an Ole Miss or a South Carolina would have put on better performances. Like I don't. Why do you think that? What has happened throughout the season that would lead you to believe that? Unless we're just back to like recruiting rankings and draft pedigree, which is like that is not what the sport needs to be. So if that's what you want it to be, then like stop talking about college football. I think I said last night, if you wanted to have a more nuanced conversation about like a Miami or even a BYU that won 10 games, right? Like that kind of like. I might listen to that more than I'd listen to the 9-3 SEC conversation based on this specific year. Like again, we don't think that every team that has 3 losses should automatically be excluded from the playoff. It's just that maybe the three teams that people are using as the shining examples of that right now, I actually don't think have all that compelling of a case. But because everyone's been brainwashed by recruiting rankings, which are important, I'm not saying they're not important. You don't get points. You don't show up with points on the scoreboard because of what your recruiting rankings are. And those teams didn't play well enough and didn't win the games they had to win to get in. So I don't care. But that's all it is. Like, and that's fine. I don't find it like, I don't know. It's not a fun conversation for me. It's very like and I get the games like all the games ended up being kind of lopsided. So I guess you're just trying to fill space. I actually think even though the scores are lopsided, there was some interesting stuff in there. Because I think even when you have games like that, the conversation should be about like, well, what did the teams who won handily put on the field? How does that project forward into the next rounds with the matchups they're going to face? And instead, it has to be a relitigation of the teams that didn't get in and a thorough examination of the teams that lost, as if like it matters at all moving forward in this playoff. Like they've picked the field, who cares? Spend the offseason talking about that if you want to, I guess. I don't have any interest in that either. But to like have it ongoing while the playoff is happening is just like a waste of time to me, especially for like ESPN talking heads whose, at least in my opinion, job should be to get people engaged in the games that are actually happening and the games that are being televised. And instead they're wasting their time trying to pump up the SEC while, their teams are sitting at home and crying about it. So I don't know. It's very frustrating, but I'm glad that, or at least I'm hopeful anyway, that we can push past it as we get into the quarterfinals now when we have some pretty compelling matchups.
So, and it's interesting, like a team like Penn State, you do realize in these situations, then they have dudes, right? Like Nick Singleton, who we talked about a ton leading into it, 14 carries for 90. He really showed something, and so did Katron Allen, who, again, has been playing pretty well the last couple of games. He went 11 for 70, so that's 25 for 160 and 3 touchdowns on the ground for their two backs. So, again, this is it's really and we've talked about it.
Number 4 rushing defense in the country.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Statistically, yeah, but absolutely, like that was the big conversation coming in. Could they do that? And they certainly did, and that's really a formula. Run game, defense, and a loud home crowd on a cold December night is now officially, I think, a game plan. And you know who's going to be really excited to try to execute that game plan and get a home game in the playoffs in the years to come? Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa State, Kansas State, Pitt, like all this, and it's an extra reason. And we've talked about it again. And then again, I think maybe to make that next jump, to then really do something from the quarters on when it's better weather and the level goes up, you probably need to be able to throw the ball and have some explosive guys. But like that, for a certain tier of team, I thought there was a real formula that people always talked about. You've got to be able to run the ball in November. And I've poo-pooed that at times over the years, especially like for the teams that really want to. But you have to start somewhere. And if you're Nebraska and you're Matt Rule, you're not trying to – you're not saying – I mean, of course you're saying it, but the first goal is not to win a national championship with Nebraska. Try to get in the playoff and try to get a home game in that place, in Memorial Stadium. And to watch this tonight, I'm eager for schools like that to eventually have that. But that formula really worked because all 3 Northern teams that won played great defense, and they all can run the ball. And they all had home crowds that made a difference. And it just accentuates what people have been talking about for 30 years, which is you've got to run the ball in the Big Ten in November. But now it's you've got to run the ball and play defense in the playoff in December in your home stadium. And what an example this first year set.
We've talked a lot about relative to Ohio State, but I think it would apply to any team that was like trying to accomplish what Ohio State tries to accomplish, is like win the Big Ten and then go win a national championship every year. That sometimes that requires 2 different styles of play. But are we now in the world where like the style of play required to win the Big Ten is actually the style required to go win a first round playoff game too?
That style has more currency, I think, because the thing is, before that only mattered in your backyard. And then it was like, to me, it was always like in your neighborhood, right? You're playing snow football in your neighborhood. And then it's like, I'm also on a travel team. And we're going to get in a van and go down to North Carolina. And it's like, well, you better have a better game plan than snow football in your backyard. when you get to North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, I can wear shorts in January. So I always felt like if you leaned into that too far, and that's why I questioned Michigan. Michigan kind of built the first thing, and then I wondered, can they do the second thing? And then they proved they could, right? But they built that first foundation. But now there's more currency because guess what? There's a 7-on-7 tournament in your backyard. They're coming up here. And I think all that stuff that we talked about, like theoretically and just from a standpoint of it being cool to make these Southern frauds come up and play in the snow, we now, like all coaches talk about is evidence. We have evidence. We have proof of concept. And it's a real concept. And again, anybody who thought like, it's overblown. It's not. It was cold and it mattered, just like the travel mattered this year. It didn't beat you on its own, but it had an effect. The cold did not beat SMU and Tennessee on its own, but it mattered. And man, getting that game, it's great for your fans, but it also matters for the football. And I think it accentuates it. And now, again, it feels like everybody embraced. I think I saw Stuart Mandel was like, can't we be inside the NFL stadiums? It's like, all right, Stu. I think almost everybody else, like, put on a sweater, bro, and you'll be fine. I think everybody else really embraced the campus thing. I think that is a victory. Do you view that as such, that this was a victory for this sport, which so often can't get out of its own way, did this right?
Yes, absolutely. I can't imagine the reaction to this being, let's put more games in corporate NFL stadiums that totally suck the collegiality out of the sport as they're trying to crown its champion. I'm with Dan Wetzel, our guy Dan. I want more on campus games, even if that means like I would love it if Notre Dame was going to Athens in a week to go play the Bulldogs in their home stadium. I think that'd be great. I'd much rather see that happen than that game happen in New Orleans. Even though we've already seen Ohio State play at Austin Stadium, I think it'd be tremendous if that game was being played there again and on down the board. So I think this is very much a win for the format. I thought there wasn't a chance maybe that we would come away feeling that it wasn't for myriad reasons. It's around the holidays. Tickets were expensive. It was cold. Like, how engaged would the crowds actually be? I thought the crowds, and at least the ones that I paid closest attention to, which were the three northern ones, they all delivered in a way that I think will have most people pretty excited about the prospect of doing this more, right? I would really be surprised if it were the opposite.
And I do think, I mean, listen, is it going to be cool if and when LSU hosts a playoff game? Of course it's going to be cool. Is it going to be cool if and when Clemson hosts a playoff game, or Alabama or Georgia? Yes, of course. Won't be as cool as the North, but it'll be cool. And then it will be a challenge, and I hope some Northern teams wind up going down there. And it's a challenge to overcome, but it's also a nice, I mean, I think people are trying to figure out, obviously the seating is going to change, that we are at this point, and that now it's like, okay, Boise and Arizona, it's a joke, right? And that's going to change. And so if you win your conference, you should get in. You shouldn't automatically get a bye. But even if you said like you at least get a home game, right? But maybe the bye, okay, then you could say, whatever, Penn State had a bye, but then at the very least, Arizona State had a home game. Like, I think the home games, the value was reinforced by all of this. So I think we've, again, maybe they knew it exactly, maybe they stumbled into it, but the three tiers of you make it, you get a home game, you get a bye, are three really distinct tiers that I think add value to the regular season. Because if you don't think, I don't think Tennessee would have beaten Ohio State if this game was in Knoxville. I think it would have been closer.
Yeah, I think so.
So, like, I think it matters. So, again, I just thought Penn State defensively had some guys who really made plays. Like, that is a big play, big talent defense. Denied Dennis Sutton had a sack on a fourth down play where he just tracked. I always love it when defensive end tracks down a quarterback like a lion, tracking a gazelle and just pounces. Like, it was just beautiful. Abdul Carter was a real problem for their left tackle a lot of the game. The linebackers were active. Their safeties are always active. Like, Penn State has some really top line talent, and much like Notre Dame, they've overcome some things on the offensive line. And Elijah Roberts, who was 5th in the nation in pressures, he made a couple of plays for SMU. He didn't dominate the game. Drew Aller has to be better, and I think Drew Aller knows that. He missed some throws early. It was kind of like, what happened there? And I think it was just footwork, just a couple misses. Again, the cold I do think matters, so he can elevate, and he needs to elevate.
Yeah.
But I thought Kotelnicki called a pretty good game, and I don't know if you saw this. I think we needed to discuss this a little bit. I'm very iffy on this. James Franklin went for it on 4th and 1 from his own 19 and didn't get it, and then got bailed out because Kevin Jennings threw his 3rd pick like 3 plays later. But it was a 14-0 game where SMU was doing nothing offensively, and James Franklin took a risk to give them a short 20-yard field. And James Franklin was asked about it after the game and said, I've been talking to our coaches, our coordinators, call the game aggressively. I've been telling our players, play the game aggressively. And I can't say that all week and then not do it when I have the chance in the game. And I was like, yeah, you can.
You can when you're inside your own 20.
Yeah, like that's the line. Not at midfield.
Right.
So I thought, so I didn't get a question in. The Penn State writers just had the chance to ask the coach. They've covered all year, so they weren't going to hand the mic to me. But it makes me a little nervous. I like aggressive James Franklin leading a very talented team with, I think, more upside still left. I like aggressive James Franklin leading that team into the quarterfinals and maybe beyond. I don't know if I like crazy gambler James Franklin, because they also, I think, are in a point where they're not so supremely 1,000% talented that they're going to bail themselves out. He said our guys had that decision's back, which was like, but the way he said it was almost like the decision itself, like, was an entity. And it's like, no, you're the entity. They had your back because nobody goes on 4th and 1 from their own 19. And then, of course, he said, and this is the thing I don't like about coaches who do that stuff. He said, well, we fumbled the snap or we would have gotten it. And everybody on 4th down is like, well, the play design was perfect. It's like, guess what? Snaps get fumbled. Passes get dropped. Guys trip over the yard line. Yep. Like, that's the whole point. When you're in a do or die situation, things can go wrong even if you have the right scheme. So I thought it was nuts. I like the idea, but I almost think he needs to have somebody pull his sleeve this week and be like, too much. What do you think?
No, I think it's nuts. I think it's nuts. And I'm like the guys back to the decision because you got an interception to bail yourself out.
Yeah, like
if you didn't get
tip ball. Yeah.
Yeah, if you didn't get that pick, I bet you wouldn't have felt like the team was backing the decision. No, I mean, we thought that James Franklin definitely needs to have a more aggressive slant in this playoff. Right?
Yes.
That's been the biggest criticism of him in big games, is that he sort of turtles and plays too conservatively. You can take it too far, and that felt like taking it too far. But if that is just an indication, I guess, of the mindset that James Franklin is taking into the postseason, I guess I find that encouraging. But yes, you do need to calibrate it, I guess, a little bit better than perhaps he did in that situation.
Yeah, and I'll be very curious. I was talking to some Penn State writers, and they were saying, like, if you only do one thing, Penn State will then, like, take that thing. Like, they'll get after you if you only can do one thing. And so I'm not sure Boise can do two things. I think Maddox Madsen is going to feel at quarterback some of the same things that Kevin Jennings felt today. Obviously, Ashton Genty is a different deal. Brashard Smith was okay for SMU running it, 18 for 62. But I think there's a world where Genty could run for 180 and Penn State could be fine if they completely shut down the passing game. But Aller needs to elevate. But he was there. I think he was, like, under control. He made some good plays scrambling and making some plays on the move when things broke down that I thought were really good. He just missed a couple throws. But also, like, it was cold. I think it affected everybody. The wind was crazy there. I felt like the wind was blowing against everybody both directions. The punts were bad both sides. It affected James Franklin turning down a field goal at one point. SMU tried like a 43-yard field goal that was short. Like, it was like the wind was a real issue there. So, like, to Drew Aller's credit, he wasn't great at all. 13 of 22 for 127, but he didn't turn it over. So it was more than enough. And now get him to the Fiesta Bowl. And I think you need to see a better Drew Aller, but I think it's very reasonable that you will see a better Drew Aller. But I think Penn State will get after the quarterback just like they did today.
The last time Drew Aller played in a dome, he looked pretty good. So
Yes,
played indoors.
exactly.
I know he turned the ball over against Oregon. I understand that, but I also thought that it was maybe the best game overall we've seen from him too. I thought he actually extended plays pretty well against
I thought so
SMU
too.
and had
Yep.
had a decent feel in the pocket when there was some pressure. He just sort of like would avoid it, reset, and then looked uncertain of where to go with the ball at that point, which is probably as much a conversation about the receivers as it is about Drew Aller, but they definitely need more. Penn State honestly might be able to play Boise or beat Boise without getting an incredibly elevated level of play from Drew Aller, but we're talking about, and I'm not trying to overlook Boise. Boise's good, but we're talking about like longer term too. Penn State's not going to make a ton of noise in this postseason if Drew Aller doesn't play a little better. Yeah.
No, they're not going to beat Notre Dame or Georgia unless he's a real threat. And again, we thought he had a chance to be maybe the second best quarterback in this playoff. Maybe not, because I thought Cade Klubnik played like a champ kind of today. And again, I wasn't shocked by that, but he really kind of kept them in the game. Not that he's a Northern guy, but the Clemson quarterback threw for 336 and 3 touchdowns. Also had to run it a little bit. He didn't gain much, but he was maneuvering around because Phil Maffa got hurt. And that was like Clemson hung in that game with backup running backs. And I know Texas is also battling it, but Quinn Ewers was okay. Arch, certainly in the action he saw, didn't look like a savior. But I don't know. Like the Northern teams put everybody away, and Texas let Clemson hang around. And so I was talking about that earlier. Maybe we can end on this because we have to at least touch on this game. Do you think that's because Clemson was better? Was Clemson the best of the 4 underdogs because they have a national championship coach and a number 1 ranked quarterback recruit? And Tennessee, SMU, and Indiana don't have that? Or so that, like, I mean, they're the 12 seed, but maybe are there parts of them that are actually better than these other teams? Or did Texas just dork around in a way that the Northern teams didn't?
It's probably some combination of both, but I think it's quite possible that Clemson was the best, even though it was seated lower. And much of that, I think, is Dabo's experience, right? It's just a staff that wasn't going to show up and go play in Austin and I think be surprised by it. I understand it's a road game and Clemson hasn't quite done that, but Clemson's won national titles. Clemson has played in playoff semifinals before. They kind of know the deal, and that gets you a far way, I think, in a setting like this. And they're talented too. If you wanted to bring recruiting rankings into the equation, their roster is certainly better than SMU's and better than Indiana's and probably better than Tennessee's, or at the very least they're on par with each other. And Clemson has a better quarterback and a better coach, I think. So. That's definitely part of it, but I would say, again, without watching that game super closely, another part of the equation is probably Texas still searching a little bit to find a way to play its best football. Yeah.
Do you know how to get a sword to New Orleans?
Producer Mike and I were talking about this in the press box. We're worried about you with the sword going down to New Orleans and being around all these Georgia fans.
Yeah. So are you worried about me having the sword, or are you worried about me not having the sword?
Both. I'm worried about what you might do if you have it on your person while you're down there, but also worried if you weren't to have it to defend yourself while you're deep in enemy territory.
Do you think there's a chance that I get in a verbal confrontation in New Orleans with somebody associated, maybe just a fan, or perhaps I wouldn't do it to a player, but maybe a Georgia coach if I ask some particularly pointed questions?
Maybe. Probably not with a player, not with a coach. I don't think with a coach. They're too locked in to care, I think. But maybe a fan or maybe a media member. Yeah.
Oh, maybe a media member. Maybe a honk. Oh, maybe I'll walk up to a SEC honk and I'll honk him on the nose. I'll just go honk, honk.
SEC Network was here in the shoe tonight.
Was Peter Burns there, the lamest man on the internet? Do you know, was he there?
I don't know what he looks like, so it's maybe, but I'm not sure.
He looks like a giant tool. So did you see a giant tool walking around talking about golf?
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay. No, maybe I'll get in a fight. I don't know if Josh Pace will be there, DJ Pickleman. They'll be running out all the hits. I mean, it's
Josh Pate was here. Was at this game? Yeah.
Oh, the commissioner of college football, the smuggest man in college football. Out-smugging me. That's why it offends me. I thought I was the smuggest man in college football. My God, that guy's full of himself. Okay. You good?
I'm good. Yeah.
I think the good folks are ready to go to bed. Listen, this is great. The 12-team playoff is fun. Congratulations to all the teams that made it. And especially congratulations to the 3 Northern teams that won. I really think this was not guaranteed, right? And I think there were some people on edge that, yes, our 3 Northern teams were all favored by more than a touchdown. That doesn't guarantee anything. And I think maybe in years past, the North would not have risen to this. And I think there are some people who still expect the North, teams like this, to not seize the moment. But I thought Notre Dame, Penn State, and Ohio State all seized the moment in a way that didn't just matter for today, but mattered for what's next, that they can do more. And I think Georgia watched Notre Dame, and they know they're in for a battle. And Boise absolutely watched Penn State, and Oregon is the best team in the country. I still think that. Dan Lanning watched this game, and he knows what's up. That's going to be a great Northern game. And I don't think anybody should forget about or disrespect Oregon just because they had this week off. But Ohio State can hang with them. They already have. And if they play like this, they will hang with them again. And it could be an all-timer, Landis, and you're going to be there.
I kind of think it's going to be. Yeah. I don't. We're not making picks. I actually don't know who I think is going to win. I got to do some rethinking on my Ohio State vibes, clearly. But that game was a classic the last time they played, and I think they're going to deliver again.
So we made our bracket picks, and we both picked an Oregon Notre Dame national title, and I picked Oregon to win, and you picked Notre Dame to win. But now as we make our picks game to game, that's what we thought then. But I'm not going to be beholden to those picks as I analyze individual games now as we gain more information. I'm not trying to be right both ways, but I'm going to look at Oregon, Ohio State, and really make a decision about what I think is going to happen. And Ohio State, I don't know if it's changed people's minds, so we'll end with this. I was very much a subscriber to it's a particular Michigan issue. Are you a subscriber to that a little bit more tonight? Do you think that this was just a good bounce back game and they schemed it up and they learned football stuff? Or do you think there was a mental, emotional component of this that they also let it rip beyond just realizing they needed to get guys on the perimeter?
Yeah, I'm subscribing to that idea more. I wasn't really there at all, only because that felt like letting Ohio State off the hook for a terrible loss. Yeah. And I didn't want to do that. But if I was going to doubt Ohio State's ability to bounce back from it and then now watch live what they did tonight, how could I not be a little bit more of a believer in that? So I think there's more truth to it. I don't know that I'm all the way there because Ryan Day, while his team has played well in the postseason, has still lost more than he's won in the postseason in these playoff games. So I'm not saying, well, maybe I am saying that I would need to maybe see it in this game against Oregon before I became a true believer in that idea. But I'm definitely was pushed more in that direction tonight.
So I just will say in conclusion, in wrapping up our 3 Northern teams, I think in many ways Marcus Freeman, James Franklin, and Ryan Day share something in that I do think in their careers, and they're of varying lengths, they have been more defined by what they are not than what they are. And that's various tiers. Marcus Freeman can't win the game he's supposed to win, right, against Northern Illinois or Marshall or games like that. James Franklin can't get over the top in big games. They call him Big Game James to make fun of him. And Ryan Day can't beat Michigan and then also sometimes can't get over the top in big games. And so this doesn't eradicate that, but I think we understand that reality. But please, let's take a moment to give credit to Marcus Freeman, that staff, all those players at Notre Dame, James Franklin, that staff, all those players at Penn State, Ryan Day, this staff, all those players at Ohio State, because it didn't have to go this way. And in moments when they have not always risen, we acknowledge that, of course we do, but they did this time. It's not the end-all be-all, but it's certainly better than the alternative. And they didn't just win, they dominated. And they dominated in the way that they want to play. They won, I think all 3 of these Northern teams, Bill, won on their terms. And Riley Leonard and Drew Aller and Will Howard are not the same player, but they won on their terms. And they all play pretty good defense, and they can all run the ball, but they still aren't exactly the same, and they won on their terms against playoff teams, against teams they should beat. They should. Yeah. They were favored by a touchdown. But you don't always win the games. You don't always win the games you should. Go ask the SEC. So before we get to, what's Penn State going to do now? Or what's Notre Dame going to do now? Or what if Ryan Day doesn't beat Oregon? Before we get to that, and we will, Good weekend for the North, brother.
It sure was. And I'm glad we got to be at all three places too.
Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to try to count up how many outlets covered all three Northern games, but then it probably is like, right. I mean, it's like ESPN's not an outlet; they're a propaganda machine. But they have good writers. It's hard to differentiate like the ESPN writers from the ESPN broadcaster. We have a lot of friends who are really good ESPN writers, but I'm sure the Athletic was at those places, and then like the individual things. But you and I are just two men with producer Mike, just three men trying to do our thing, and we hit all three games. But the only reason we do that is because we have this tremendous community that makes it fun for us. So we've had a great crowd in here, and like it's ridiculous. Like this was nothing a couple years ago. It was nothing, and it was just a man. There wasn't even a sword. The sword probably wasn't even fired yet. I was just a man. The sword was a dream, and so here we are now, and you guys make it fun. So the only thing like we ask in times of this is like we understand that Michigan fans and Ohio State fans and Penn State fans and Oregon fans and Washington fans and we get it, but like save a little hate for the South. That's all, because we kind of are in this together, right? If you play football in the snow, we're in this together, and that's what this weekend was about. So it was a good weekend for Northern football, but it was a good weekend for us because of you guys. So thanks to everybody who joined us here live on YouTube. Thanks to everybody who's going to watch this back. Thanks to everybody who's going to listen to this back on podcast platforms. And we are going to break these games down. We'll be back on Monday. We're going to break these games down this week, and then we're going to be live on the scene. So we'll be breaking these games down live with interviews in New Orleans, in Pasadena, and then we will be back going live. So the New Year's Eve, I don't know what we're going to do on New Year's Eve. We're not going to be at that game, at the Boise Penn State game, but do people want to hang out with us on New Year's Eve? Talk about a game we watched on TV? Maybe.
We're gonna watch it. We'll bring in the New Year with you after watching.
I think we'll probably do it. Yeah. And then like we're gonna have a hell of a time trying to figure out what we're gonna do. But you're gonna cover the Rose Bowl at 5:00, and I'm gonna cover the Sugar Bowl at 8:30, and then we're gonna do a show into the wee hours after that because it's really gonna matter. So thanks to everybody who's part of it. You make KOTN possible. So thanks to Mike Yerstowski, who's there on the scene in Columbus, always making us look good and sound good and making sure we're not screwing this thing up. So we couldn't do it without producer Mike. Thanks to 2 jobs, 2 games, and 2 days, Bill Landis holding it down. And I went to Penn State, so it was good. For now, on a big weekend of Northern college football, he's Bill, I'm Doug, and that was KOTN Late Night on Kings of the North.